What if the hidden corners of cartoon history held stranger gems than the classics we all know? Imagine glassy-eyed monkeys dancing gnomes, marching like soldiers, and pharmacy bottles springing to life after dark. These weren't the polished tales Disney wanted remembered. They were colorful, chaotic, and a little unsettling, but impossible to forget. Today we're uncovering 12 cartoons from the past that slipped through the cracks, and trust me, some of these reels will surprise you. The Peanut Vendor, 1933. Creepy puppet or groundbreaking experiment? That's the question you'll ask the second you meet the glassy-eyed monkey at the center of Len Lai's short film, The Peanut Vendor. On the surface, it's just a stop-motion puppet dancing and crooning a tune while selling peanuts. But the way it moves rubbery limbs, manic energy, and twitchy expressions feels both hilarious and disturbing at the same time. The soundtrack is a Cuban rumba that ramps up the chaos, making the little figure flail faster and faster, until you're not sure if you should laugh or hide. Len Lai, the New Zealand-born experimental filmmaker behind it, wasn't interested in telling a cozy story. He was after pure sensation. The Peanut Vendor wasn't made for kids, wasn't designed for Saturday mornings, and definitely wasn't meant to blend in with the safe animations of its era. Instead, it was a mashup of abstract art puppetry and new sound technology that felt shocking in the early 30s. What makes it fascinating is how it straddles the line between silly and nightmarish. The monkey even dances with its own tail, as if the whole production is in on some surreal joke. For film historians, it's a key example of how experimental animation pushed boundaries long before mainstream studios caught up. For casual viewers, it's the kind of clip that makes you say, "What on earth did I just watch?" You can still find restored versions online, which means you can share the same uneasy chuckle as audiences did nearly a century ago. The Peanut Vendor proves that even in the earliest days of sound and stop motion, animators weren't afraid to get truly bizarre. And honestly, that's exactly why it deserves to be remembered. The Sunshine Makers, 1935. What if happiness could be bottled and dropped like confetti on anyone who didn't want it? That's the premise of The Sunshine Makers, a Technicolor short from Van Buren Studios. Directed by Burt Gillette and Ted Esbach, it throws us into a candy-colored world where red-suited gnomes literally bottle sunshine and march in formation to spread cheer. Sounds harmless, right? Until you realize they're forcing it on a tribe of gloomy blue goblins who actually enjoy being sad. The gnomes hurl jars of glowing light like little grenades, and before long the goblins are pinned down grinning against their will. Their frowns are stretched into unnatural smiles as the soundtrack belts out cheery tunes. What looks like a playful romp quickly starts to feel like a strange lesson in conformity. Don't like the light? Too bad. Drink it anyway. Animation fans have debated this one for decades. Was it just a goofy cartoon? Or was it reflecting the cultural push during the Great Depression for people to keep smiling no matter how bleak things were? On the surface, it's silly with bouncing music and wide-eyed characters. But under the surface, it's unsettling, like happiness being turned into an order instead of a choice. The Sunshine Makers remains one of the most striking examples of early color animation. Its bright palette and offbeat premise show how studios other than Disney were experimenting with storytelling and style. Today it's remembered less for its laughs and more for its sheer oddness. Watch it once and you'll never forget the sight of cheerful gnomes force-feeding sunshine to creatures who just wanted to be left alone in the dark. In My Merry Oldsmobile, 1931. Imagine a cartoon that's actually a car commercial, only with more jazz slapstick and questionable choices than you'd expect. That's In My Merry Oldsmobile, a Fleischer Studios short built entirely around the popular tune of the same name. If you've seen Popeye or Betty Boop, you know the Fleischers could make just about anything entertaining. This time, they set their sights on selling Oldsmobiles. Yes, an actual automobile ad disguised as a cartoon. The setup follows a young couple who find romance thanks to their shiny Oldsmobile. It's part sing-along, part slapstick farce, and part marketing pitch. Audiences were invited to follow the bouncing ball across the lyrics, singing along while being gently nudged to consider buying the car. But beneath the playful veneer, there's some strange material. The villain of the piece is a leering troublemaker who lurks outside the young woman's window, a peeping intruder who tries to ruin her love story. For a cartoon meant to sell cars, that's already a bizarre narrative turn. Of course, the couple eventually escape zooming off together in their trusty automobile. The real star of the show isn't the romance or the villain, but the Oldsmobile itself, gleaming and dependable. Its marketing wrapped in musical gags, and while it might feel clunky today, it was groundbreaking at the time. Advertising inside animation wasn't the norm in the early 30s, and this cartoon showed how easily entertainment could blend with promotion. Viewed today, In My Merry Oldsmobile feels like an artifact from another world. Its jazzy soundtrack, rubber hose animation, and innuendo-filled lyrics are charming but strange, especially when you realize the whole thing was designed to move cars off the lot. It's not exactly subtle, but that's part of the fun. Looking back, it's both an amusing musical and one of the earliest examples of product placement on screen. Monkey Doodle, 1931. If Chaos had a theme song, it might sound like the wild jazz soundtrack of Monkey Doodle. Produced by animator Les Elton, this short is less a story and more a fever dream. On paper, it's about monkeys dancing and swinging around a tropical jungle. In reality, it plays out like a musical jam session inside a madhouse. Limbs stretch, characters bounce, and logic is left at the door. The film is notable for its crude style compared to the polished work of Disney or Fleischer, but that rawness gives it an off-kilter energy. Monkeys cavort without much direction, a dog wanders by in saggy pants. And then there's the female monkey introduced at the end, with features that seem oddly detailed for the era. Even more unsettling, every surviving copy of the cartoon has large chunks of missing sound. Historians believe the audio might have been deliberately removed, possibly because of controversial content, but we'll probably never know for sure. What's left is a half-complete artifact that somehow feels even stranger because of its gaps. The silence makes the already surreal visuals feel like something you've stumbled on by accident, as if it wasn't meant to be seen. And yet, it's fascinating. The jazzy rhythm that remains drives the action, turning Monkey Doodle into a bizarre blend of music video and animated chaos. Watching it today, you get the sense that Elton wasn't playing by anyone's rules. He threw everything at the screen, whether it worked or not, and the result is a time capsule of pure, unfiltered imagination. It may not have aged gracefully, but it's proof that even small studios in the early 30s were willing to experiment wildly. Strange? Absolutely, but unforgettable once you've seen it. The Little Match Girl, 1937. Not every cartoon from the 30s was about laughs and music. Some were meant to break your heart. Columbia Pictures. The Little Match Girl, directed by Arthur Davis, is one of the rare animated shorts that ditches comedy for pure tragedy. Based on Hans Christian Andersen's story, it follows a poor girl wandering the snowy streets, shivering as she tries to sell matches. Each time she lights one, she glimpses comforting visions. A warm home, a feast, a glowing hearth. And each time the vision fades. Unlike the usual bouncy comedies of its era, this short is quiet, haunting, and deliberately emotional. There's no dialogue, only music, color, and imagery that speaks volumes. The contrast between the harsh, icy streets and the warm visions creates a powerful emotional pull. By the end, when the girl drifts into the final glow of light, it's clear this isn't just another cartoon. It's a small work of art designed to make audiences weep. Why would Columbia take such a risk? Perhaps because they wanted to show that animation could do more than slapstick. Disney was already experimenting with fairy tales, but Columbia pushed the envelope with a story that left audiences stunned rather than smiling. Critics today view it as one of the most daring departures from the usual funny short formula. If you're used to cartoons being all about comedy, The Little Match Girl will shock you. It's a reminder that even in the 1930s, animation wasn't locked into one box. It could be whimsical, eerie, or in this case, heartbreakingly beautiful. You might only watch it once, but you'll never shake it from your memory. Tulips Shall Grow, 1942. Sometimes animation tells stories that live closer to nightmares than fairy tales. George Pal's Tulips Shall Grow is a perfect example. Released in the early 1940s as part of his Puppetoon series, it uses wooden puppets instead of drawn characters, and the result is both beautiful and haunting. The short opens with a Dutch couple happily tending their tulip fields, their world painted in bright colors and gentle rhythms. Then suddenly the tone shifts. An invading army of faceless metallic screwball soldiers marches in, crushing everything underfoot. The once idyllic landscape is destroyed as homes crumble and fields burn. Even though this is stop motion, the devastation feels disturbingly real. It doesn't take much to notice the allegory. Released during the Second World War, the short is widely seen as Paul's commentary on the Nazi invasion of Holland, where he had grown up. The faceless machines aren't just villains, they're stand-ins for the grinding terror of war. And while the film does offer hope in the end, with nature pushing back and tulips growing again, the images of destruction linger longer than the resolution. For audiences in the 1940s, Tulips Shall Grow must have felt shockingly direct. Most cartoons of the time were light distractions, but this one leaned hard into allegory and dread. Watching it today, the clunky movements of the puppets only make it feel more unsettling, as though the entire world has been turned mechanical. It's a reminder that animation can be more than comedy. It can carry the weight of history itself. And once you've seen those blank-eyed soldiers marching through tulip fields, it's not something you forget. It's A Greek Life, 1936. What happens when ancient mythology collides with zany cartoon logic? You get It's a Greek Life, a short from Van Buren Studios that is equal parts chaotic and charming. Unlike Disney's grand takes on myth, this one is pure cartoon mischief. The story follows a bumbling centaur cobbler hired to repair the winged sandals of Mercury. Of course, instead of handing them back, he slips them on himself and rockets off into the sky. What follows is a series of frantic rubbery gags. The centaur zooms through the heavens, crashes into gods, and turns mythology into slapstick mayhem. There's almost no dialogue, just a musical score that pushes the action into overdrive. Every scene feels like it could collapse at any moment, yet the energy never dips. Van Buren's style was always a little rougher than Disney's, but that rawness works here. The animation bursts with color and movement, as though the animators couldn't contain their ideas. For modern viewers, it's the tone that stands out. Instead of reverence for myth, the short treats the Greek gods like props in a wild carnival ride. There's a gleeful disregard for logic, and that's what makes it so memorable. It's a Greek Life might not have the polish of a Disney classic, but it proves that smaller studios were just as eager to experiment with wild premises. It's bright, it's fast, and it's strange in the best possible way. Bottles, 1936. Picture this. A quiet pharmacy at night, bottles lined neatly on the shelves. Suddenly they all come to life, and not in a gentle Disney sort of way. That's the surreal nightmare at the heart of Warner Brothers Bottles, directed by Hugh Harman. The short begins innocently enough. A pharmacist falls asleep after mixing a strange concoction. But one bottle labeled with crossbones springs to life as a skeleton and doses him with a shrinking potion. From there, all the bottles in the shop join in. Baby bottles cry, liquor bottles dance, and a chorus of animated glass containers fills the screen with manic energy. Just when it seems like harmless fun, things turn dark. The skeleton bottle summons witches' ghosts and fiery visions that torment the tiny pharmacist. He's dragged through a fiery maze of bottles and tubes, the skeleton cackling in the background. For a cartoon released in the mid-30s, it's shockingly creepy. What makes Bottles so fascinating is its tone. It blends playful musical numbers with imagery that borders on horror. One minute you're watching a silly gag, the next you're staring at a skeletal bottle grinning like it stepped out of a nightmare. It's a mashup of moods that shouldn't work, but somehow does. Looking back, this cartoon feels like it was made for Halloween rather than Saturday mornings. It's a perfect example of how early animators weren't afraid to push into darker territory, creating something equal parts whimsical and unsettling. A Swiss Trick, 1931. Before the famous cat and mouse duo stole the name Tom and Jerry were actually a pair of human characters, and their adventures got weird. Case in point, A Swiss Trick. A Van Buren Studios short that takes the duo into the snowy Alps. The premise is loose at best. Tom and Jerry board a mountain train, which promptly breaks down. From there, the pair stumble through a string of oddball gags. They're helped by a scrawny St. Bernard slide down icy slopes and somehow end up being mistaken for pieces of cheese. Yes, cheese. By the finale, mice are chasing them down the mountain, biting into their bodies like they're walking blocks of Swiss. The animation style is classic rubber hose. Limbs stretch, physics bend, and reality is an afterthought. What stands out today is how dreamlike it feels. Scenes don't really connect logically. Instead, the short is more like a parade of surreal sketches stitched together. The sight of living cheese on a leash or mice chomping on the protagonists isn't just funny, it's downright unsettling. While Van Buren never matched Disney's polish, they excelled at strangeness. A Swiss trick may not have the reputation of Mickey Mouse or Popeye, but it shows how even the underdog studios were experimenting with bizarre ideas. Watching it now, you're left wondering whether it was meant to be comedy nightmare or a bit of both. And maybe that's why it sticks in your mind long after the credits roll. Dinnertime, 1928. Everyone remembers Disney's Steamboat Willie as the cartoon that kicked off the sound era. But a month before that, Paul Terry's Dinnertime actually hit theaters. The difference? While Disney's mouse became an icon, Terry's farmer and his dogs were mostly forgotten. Still, Dinnertime is worth revisiting because it's a strange, noisy relic of animation's earliest experiments with sound. The setup is simple. Farmer Alfalfa, a grumpy butcher, is surrounded by a pack of hungry dogs. He tries to fend them off while chaos erupts around his shop. The gags are frantic, the pacing relentless, and the sound effects, well, let's just say rough is putting it kindly. The synchronization between visuals and sound is often offbeat, making the cartoon feel jittery and chaotic. Compared to Disney's smoother debut, Dinnertime looks clunky, but that rawness gives it an odd charm. Instead of polished musical timing, you get something closer to a fever dream, dogs howling, plates crashing, and a soundtrack that seems slightly out of sync with the mayhem on screen. Historians consider it significant because it beat Steamboat Willie to theaters, proving that sound animation was possible. But its real legacy is how strange it feels today. Watching it, you're reminded just how experimental those first steps into synchronized sound really were. It's not polished, it's not perfect, but it's undeniably fascinating. Willie Whopper in Hell's Fire, 1934. Take a wide-eyed cartoon kid, toss him into a volcano, and then send him straight to the underworld. Sound like a normal short from the 30s? Not quite. Willie Whopper in Hell's Fire is one of the most bizarre entries in Ub Iwerk's Willie Whopper series, and it's unforgettable for all the wrong or right reasons. The cartoon opens with Willie and his dog climbing a volcano. When Willie tosses a rock into the crater, it bonks the devil on the head. Big mistake. A fiery hand shoots out, drags them into the depths, and suddenly we're on a tour of the underworld. What follows is a carnival of chaos. Willie encounters a three-headed hound, historical figures like Napoleon and Nero, and even Rasputin doing a manic Russian dance. Famous characters from history and fiction are paraded through the flames, each one given a darkly comic spin. The most unsettling part, hell isn't shown as punishment, it's presented more like a bizarre party. The color process only adds to the oddness. Because Disney had exclusive rights to full Technicolor Iwerks, used a limited two-color system. The result is a palette that feels half-finished, dreamlike, and even creepier. For audiences in the 1930s, this was boundary-pushing stuff. For modern viewers, it's equal parts surreal and amusing. Willie Whopper in Hell's Fire shows how far animators would go to grab attention and how strange the results could be when they weren't following anyone's rules. Alice's Eggplant, 1925. Before Mickey, before Donald, before Goofy. Walt Disney was making cartoons about chickens on strike. Yes, really. Alice's Eggplant is one of the strangest installments in Disney's early Alice comedies, a hybrid series that combined live action with animation. In these shorts, a live-action little girl named Alice interacted with a cartoon world, and this particular entry veers into the bizarre. The setup is simple. A farmer runs a chicken yard where eggs are being mass-produced like a factory line. But when a slick rooster shows up, he rallies the hens to protest their working conditions. Suddenly, the barnyard becomes a parody of industrial labor disputes, complete with marching chickens and chaotic scenes that look suspiciously like real-world satire. For a short aimed at audiences in the mid-20s, this was shockingly bold. Cartoons at the time were usually about silly gags or slapstick antics, but here Disney dipped into topical humor. The chickens are shown holding out, refusing to cooperate until things go their way. To lighten the mood, the film adds a dose of slapstick and a cheeky wink at barnyard romance. But the underlying message is still there. Even hens can demand better treatment. What's fascinating about Alice's Eggplant is how it foreshadows Disney's later ambition to tackle bigger stories. You can see flashes of his willingness to experiment, blending satire with comedy and inserting commentary into what was supposed to be light entertainment. Of course, the humor is crude by today's standards, but the concept alone makes it stand out. Most of the Alice comedies have slipped into obscurity, but this one remains a favorite among animation historians because of how unusual it is. After all, when was the last time you saw a Disney cartoon about chickens staging a walkout? So, there you have it, 12 forgotten cartoons that prove animation's past wasn't just polished fairy tales. It was wild, chaotic, and often downright strange. From glassy-eyed monkeys to dancing bottles and tulip fields under attack, these shorts show how creativity thrived on the edges. Which one shocked you most? Drop your pick in the comments, hit subscribe for more deep dives into lost animation, and share this with a friend who loves weird history.